Hello, what's up, guys? Welcome to another Facebook Live. And tonight we're going to talk about EMFs. And we're going to ask the question, are EMFs really a big deal? And I have an expert on with me tonight. And I have kind of a funny story about that as to why you can't see him. I'll tell you that in a minute. But real quick, in case you don't know who I am, my name's Nathan Walls. And I specialize in helping people increase their energy at the cellular level to help them reverse disease and reverse aging. So that's kind of my specialty. I've been bringing on other experts to my Facebook Lives to share their area of expertise with you. So I know a fair amount about EMFs, but there are certainly people that know a whole lot more than me. And before I let Scott introduce himself, a quick background. Last week, I spoke to Dr. Jack Cruz. He talked about a lot of things. One of the things he mentioned was deuterium, and there was a lot of buzz on that. So just a real quick overview on deuterium. When your body is healthy, it naturally depletes deuterium. And your body does this to protect its mitochondrial health. So when this process breaks, you get mitochondrial diseases. So this includes cancer, neurodegeneration, metabolic diseases like obesity, diabetes, autoimmune diseases. So it's very bad news. And what happens is when you collect too much deuterium, it slows down your production of ATP. And if you remember, Dr. Cruz was saying a healthy person every day creates more ATP than their own body weight. So when you're not healthy, you create less ATP. That means you have less energy for your body to do the things it needs to do for you to be healthy. It breaks down. You get symptoms. You get disease. Now, the reason I brought Scott Compton on tonight is because blue light and non-native EMFs break this process. They ruin your body's ability to deplete deuterium. You collect deuterium, and it destroys your mitochondrial function, leading to the diseases that I just mentioned. So when I first reached out to Scott, I made the mistake of not asking him if he has a smartphone. And I shouldn't have assumed that. But being the true EMF warrior that Scott is, he doesn't own a smartphone. And the only way you can do these Facebook Lives right now is both people have to be on a smartphone. So I'm actually on my laptop. You know, last week people were giving us grief for doing the live over our smartphones, but that's our only option right now. So I'm on my laptop. I've got Scott on my phone, so hopefully you can hear him okay. This is something we just kind of came up with on the fly. But hey, Scott, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into becoming an expert on EMFs.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, guys, how's it going? As you know, I'm on my dumb phone here, and I love my dumb phone. I'm actually really proud of it. I tell people all the time that I tell my dumb phone.
Hey, just real quick. Can you guys hear Scott okay? Getting lots of thumbs up. So, okay, thanks, Scott. Back to you.
Yeah, so yeah, I've got my dumb phone here on purpose because I don't have really an option to go to a smartphone. But yeah, I want the 3G frequency over the 4G. There's a little bit of EMF reasoning behind that as well with the frequencies, actually the number of frequencies that are coming in. So anyway, we can get into that later. So as a lot of you know already, I used to be a biologist. I used to work at Stanford, have a lot of biology background. But when I was at Stanford, I was exposed to a lot of like a breadth of information and knowledge on just biology in general. Working in like what was called right there in the lab, it was like a Bio 44 and 44X and Y student teaching labs. Like most of the pre-meds would need to go through my lab to have the course curriculum and have the approval there. So during these labs, there were a lot of special projects. I was like exposed to like hundreds of different projects. People were like, for instance, trying to like simulate what Mars would be like, to have like a simulation for growing stuff on Mars, for instance. Or I was working also in microbiology and genetics labs and doing a lot of live, actually using fish and ants and all kinds of stuff just across the board. So I kind of like, my biology background is a little strange. It's kind of the opposite of most biologists, where they get trained in just one aspect of research and they kind of just dive into that. For my background, I was more like, hey, I like seeing all these connections and how all these things are interlinked. So, as you know, as a cruise member, when I saw that he was connecting like all these dots, like all through the biology, not just the biology, but the biophysics specifically. And that really interested me in just seeing the connections that really weren't even exposed to me at both at Oregon State, at Stanford, and other places. I had gotten basically my knowledge at that time. So knowing that, I'm the first one to admit, hey, I didn't know a lot about EMF, even back in the day. It really wasn't until I started coming down with my own electrosensitivity, where I started to connect it more, because like the screen time I would have both at work and at home started to affect my vision. And I really came down with really like arterial bleeding, like capillary bleeding in the back of my retinas, and it was starting to cause blindness.
Wow.
So
and Scott, how long ago? When did this first start? When did your EHS first start?
It started in probably 1997, and maybe even earlier than that, like periodically. Kind of like, I was about 26, 27 years old when it really started to kick in, and I noticed the spots like forming all of the time. And my body, the eye does clear them out if they're not that bad, but if they're like more of a really bad bleeding into the eye, that spot could be there for weeks or months. So as you can imagine, like me knowing a person with having a biology background, I'm like, okay, well, obviously it's the biochemical something that something I'm eating that's causing this. And really, I didn't put two and two together until a few years after that, when I started getting out into the morning sun, training for a marathon, and almost all of my eye issues just basically vanished and went away. And then
very interesting.
Later on, like to a gym later at night, I noticed all my issues would come back. So I'm like, what is going on here, right?
Yeah.
So then, fast forward to the time we're at now, and knowing like what Cruz has taught us and what other people have taught us about the biophysics, like Becker and Marino, it makes a lot of sense. So, I kind of have a pet peeve now with biochemistry versus biophysics, because we have a medical community very focused on the biochemistry. They're very well trained in biochemistry, and their knowledge set in their schooling, they're really not really exposed to light frequencies, electromagnetic spectrum, and things like this. And I like to use this analogy because I'm also a gamer. People are probably reading in the bio here, but as a gamer, I like to use analogies that are games that everybody knows. Like chess is a really good one. I've thought about this. Like when a person plays chess, they can see all the chess moves on the board, right? So you see where the pawns it's a rule set that's associated with them. So, sorry, I had an incoming call. I'll continue here. So if you think of a chessboard, that's kind of like the biochemistry to me. Like there's just certain things that will happen on the chessboard for the pieces. It's the known rule set. And it's like very reductionist thinking. Like if I move here, this will happen. It's very cause effect. But then what happens is suddenly I shine red light on, let's say, the queen. Now suddenly maybe the queen can jump spaces because there's a new system involved. Or what if at the root of the chessboard itself, like the spaces, maybe the spaces can change. I kind of like as a good analogy, thinking about electromagnetic energy inside of us and how it works. If the if we have this like DC built into us, and we can alter that and change it, then it's almost like changing the actual rule set of that chessboard. So I try to pull out analogies that people can more relate to as thinking about the biochemistry in contrast to the biophysics, because the biophysics is having this other effect on the biochemistry, and a lot of times the biophysics is gating off what the biochemistry can do for good or for bad. So I have to really pull back and think about that all the time, and it's really easy to fall into reductionist thinking on the matter.
Right.
Yeah. So now in my approach, I look at the entire issue of biology through this lens of, okay, biochemistry is happening this way, but what other influencers, what other things dependent on? And then it turns out a lot of what we have built into us is dependent on light frequencies. And when I say light frequencies, I mean, I'm talking about the whole electromagnetic spectrum, and with my EHS, or it's more like I have not full-blown EHS, I have more like electrosensitivities. So I'm going to differentiate that a bit. But with my ES, I know that when I am hit with a microwave to my head at a certain milliwatts per square meter, I run the risk of having another eye rupture. Or if I put myself in an alternating current field, like a magnetic or electrical field, at a certain milligauss, I know I run the risk of some spots appearing in my vision. So it's like I have this built-in sensory kind of built into me where I can literally see as a meter when the bad stuff happens. I call it my negative superpowers.
Right, right.
I've kind of nicknamed myself Mr. Spock. I'm not really from this world because sometimes I got these other things going on. And in my world, I see it as this literally real thing happening because I know when the cause and effect happens from the EMF and or from other oxidative stress.
Right.
So that's where it really gets into it's a very complex formula, and for my situation, I kind of know the triggers more as a higher probability something bad could happen. But it also could be just the perfect synergy of the biochemistry as well. I can glutamate loaded meal with a lot of processed food, a lot of deuterium in it, right? All these other things that could enter my bloodstream, put more blood pressure through me, and that extra blood pressure could contribute to the capillary bursting, et cetera, et cetera. So, it is an endless potential synergy with a lot of factors involved. It's not just biochemistry. The biophysics really is a very pivotal part of the entire puzzle.
Right. And Scott,
yeah.
I just want to highlight something you said. Well, I want to point out a couple things. First, Scott was very observant of how his body reacted to different environments that he put himself in. So in 1997, nobody was talking about EHS. Well, a few people were. We've actually known about it since, I think the first research paper I read was from 1939. But anyway, very few people were aware of it. And Scott kind of made the connection that he went outside in the morning and got sun when he was training for a marathon. He felt better. He worked out at night in a gym under fake blue light. He felt worse. And I also want to point out something you said. Basically, this really connected a lot of dots for me when I heard this from Dr. Jack Cruz, is that physics dictates biology. So you can have all your biology, you can be eating the best diet in the world, but if your physics are off, if you're getting the wrong frequencies of light, it's going to mess up your biology. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that point that Scott made. And Scott, why don't you share with us about your Facebook group, the EMF Warriors? I know you have a website off of Facebook too, but tell us about EMF Warriors, what your mission is, and some of the work you guys are doing.
Yeah. So our idea is to amass a really large hub, like a big network for all the other EMF groups that have already been out there, and to really have a unification point where, almost like a stepping stone point where, like, everybody out there that's already currently trying to message this narrative of, wait, EMF could be problematic for your health, having a go-to place where we can like pull in people, you know, interview them, have podcasts, just like have a really dynamic situation where we can help with the overall getting people aware about this issue, but really doing it through credibility and trying to pull in not just what we know about the negative, but also that other point is trying to make it where everyone out there knows we're going to be using tech as we move forward. Let's try to do it more safely and really identify that there is a problem. And, you know, that can open up a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs that want to make safe tech and give us less exposure just to the entire EMF space that's out there. So, that, you know, as we're moving toward a really highly technical world where all of these frequencies are hitting us in more probability all the time, now we have to be more mindful of, okay, how can I find a sanctuary? How can I make my home more into an EMF, more safe zone where I'm getting less exposure potential, especially now from, you know, the RF microwaves that are out there, the radio frequencies that are out there, just that are being saturated, including the filling up of the electromagnetic spectrum bands as we move forward with 5G, because now they're opening up new frequencies into the higher, you know, 10 to 100 gigahertz range that, you know, they're less penetrative into the body, but they, you know, have a lot of surface interactions. And surface interactions, you know, in my world, that's my eyes. That's the first gateway to my brain, because my eyes are part of my brain. Mm-hmm. So if I get a higher intensity dose of a higher, like 5G frequency, let's say, you know, 60 gigahertz, and I happen to be walking through that beam, I run a serious risk of having an eye issue, right? So that's what I'm thinking about is, okay, well, not only do we have these older frequencies that are there, but are also expanding and are being bought up and that are only getting more saturated and more dense, like more intensity building with the older frequencies. Those aren't going away. We have all those with the newer one on top of it. It's like, if you already have an electrosensitivity or you're prone to it, you know, it translates more into potentially more oxidative stress, more wearing down of things, just speeding up toward faster to death, right? Than what you were intended to be out there in nature, not having this entire frequency band. We were never intended to be exposed to this entire part of the EMF, you know, the EMF spectrum. I should about that to listeners if they're not aware. So, like, visible light is a higher frequency that we can see. You know, our eyes can see at the speed of light. We're seeing everything around us, and all these lower, like, they're still called higher frequencies, but these microwave frequencies, the radio frequencies, including the radio bands, the television, the radar, all this saturation out there, these higher frequencies, it's just, they're all being competed with. They're all being bought out by companies to have their magical band bought up so they can do their business. And, you know, it's a worldwide thing, and including, like, you know, the bands are sold and bought from different countries even. So what we have going on is these newer frequencies that never existed before on Earth that we're being hit with. And they're also modulated frequencies. They're pulsed frequencies that are abnormal light. So even though they are a form of light, they are modulated. There's information being carried on them, and people just won't understand what's going on unless you really read the science, because you can't see them, and only few of us can feel them or have results from them as like a canary in the coal mine, which I am, as one of us.
So Scott, just one thing I want to highlight, the fact that you said that this is additive. So it's not like they're adding 5G and all these other frequencies are going away. It's going on top of everything. And Scott, can you maybe talk to the amount of, and maybe my terminology is off here, but the amount of electrosmog or the amount of these frequencies in our environment now relative to, say, like 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, like, right now, you know, like a lot of what we're dealing with now is we have a lot of small cells being rolled out, which are smaller emitters, like radio frequency emitters that are just there's more of them and they're more populated, kind of like, you know, they're going to be coming to a neighborhood near all of us, but like you can imagine every block or two or three, you're going to have something that's pulsing out like an emitter, almost like the smart meter grid right now, because on most homes in a modern community, every home has a smart meter associated with it, transmitted the data for the electrical usage. And because we have like saturation of the smart meters all over the place, that's kind of the direction the new 5G is going, where that's going to be rolled out everywhere. So like 5-10 years ago, really it's like you can find some sort of RF emitter more sporadic, you know, like maybe one emitter every few miles away. So the likelihood you're living close to one, now if you are living closer to one, even in the home, you could be picking up like 20 to 50 milliwatts per square meter of radio frequency even into your home, because this stuff penetrates and goes through a lot of materials.
Right.
Especially if you have like a wood home, you know, like more like plaster. You don't have brick or concrete or something that can be more of an RF absorber that can help mitigate down the radio frequency a bit. Glass, it loves going through glass. I mean, most of the materials we've got out there, a lot of our homes, you know, a lot of this specific frequency band, especially between more like the 400 megahertz to like, you know, up to almost like the 2.4 gigahertz. So kind of like in that whole band, it really can penetrate through materials pretty well. And as a biological organism myself, it can penetrate through me.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I was just agreeing with what you said. So good, go on.
Yeah. So that's kind of the, like, you know, so as they roll out the new stuff, it's not that the new stuff is going to be better. It can be better in certain ways, because they have to do more beamforming and pull these frequencies kind of like more like laser beam to transmit the data to have it along certain points. So they'll do that in certain areas, but they still have to use a 4G kind of like the older band network to get their base technology still working, transmitting everything happening. And it's not just companies. I mean, like, if you look at the regular person out there, it's like, what is on the Christmas list right now for a lot of the kids out there? It's like, oh, I want a new drone. And then the FAA is like, well, make sure you don't fly your drones at a certain height because it's going to interfere with airspace. And, like, you know, the list goes on. And what is actually coming out on all the social media, not social media, but the social funding groups like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, like these kind of places, if you just go on there, like 30-40% of the things coming out that are the latest tech gadgets usually have a microwave emitter on there somewhere. So our exposures, we have to like be more mindful on what I usually call the EMF hygiene. You have to think about what could potentially be emitting this and what proximity, how close am I to it? Because the inverse square law helps you here. If you just get away from it, the intensities go down a lot. But like if you have, you know, if you're using technology right up close to you, then like, you know, right now as I'm talking on the phone, I'm about like 1.5 feet away from the phone. So if I get a little closer, if I get like, you know, 6 inches from the phone, I run the risk again of having eye issues, because that's kind of what I've experienced in the past. Over the 20 years, I have that like intuition built into me. I don't want to like be that close to an RF emitter due to I don't really expect to want a blind spot to appear in my vision. I mean, that's like a pretty strong thing. What, you know, you have to think of it through that lens. Like,
yeah.
Hey,
Scott, and just correct me if I don't get this right, but going from 2 feet from your phone to 1 foot from your phone, it's not twice as bad, it's 4 times as bad because of this inverse square law.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, it's like, you know, the square root mathematical formula there. And so, like, literally putting a phone, like I'm doing, like, 1.5 feet away from, another foot away from my head is pulling down the intensity. However, some people are more sensitive. This is no good for them either at the distance I'm at. I mean, I really want to be out of the room, away from the phone. Mm-hmm. And there's no way, luckily I have a 3G phone, so it's like only transmitting data when I'm actively on it like I am now. With a 4G phone or higher, like LTE, you're going to have periodic updates all the time, 24/7 from that phone into your space. So that's why I don't have a smartphone, for the reason I don't want it in the home, bringing in radio frequencies from the outside and then pulsing them around into my home where I'm at, to run the risk of, an eye bleed.
Yeah. And guys, so this is coming from a guy who spent 20 years in IT and a gamer, a video gamer. So this isn't some Luddite that just is anti-technology. He's very aware of technology. He's aware of the risk. And one of the things he does to mitigate his risk is, he has an old-fashioned phone, or, a 3G phone, and he keeps his distance from that phone.
Yep. And just a note there, like, EMF Warriors, it looks like we just hit 10,000 people.
Awesome. And, congrats.
Yeah, literally today, the day we're talking, it looks like we've hit 10,000 people. But, like, I think there's a new awakening, a new awareness that's happening with people. Like, they feel, like, a lot of more people are starting to feel kind of more like, different intersections of the EMFs. Like, they're either feeling like they're more stressed, right? I mean, stress response is the big one. Just like, they get overly stressed, or they'll have, like even frustration, different emotional responses. And people, obviously, if you hold the phone itself, because of the star rating, if you hold the phone itself to your ear for a good 15, 20 minutes, most people will feel like a heat or like a tingling or something going on. So I think most people, if they have common sense still left in them, and they have some intuition built into them, they know something's up. Like, they know, how does this technology work? And really the irony, I ask people all the time on the street I talk to, I don't try to be condescending in any way to them. I just ask them, like, well, it's really good if you understand how this technology is working, because you're using this thing daily. Are you aware of what's going on, how this thing's working? Like, could you define some of the details around it? And after getting into a conversation with people, once I describe the physics at work, I don't even have to say anything. I don't have to even convince them. They know that, okay, wait a minute, information, different pulsing, I run at this frequency, I have all these regenerative processes in me at these lower frequencies, at this DC pulsing, like a DC electromagnetic energy in me that also works on these levels. And really talking to, digging a little deeper into the cell, what's going on to the cell, what would happen if you, pulse, like with Paul's paper, like if you pulse EMF toward a cell, it looks like you get peroxy nitrite, which is a free radical. This has been demonstrated. Like usually I don't even have to go that far. They just instinctively know something's bad, but I usually end up having to tell them more of the science because they're more interested. Because why haven't I known about this my entire life? This has been going on since the late 1940s and 1950s is when this is for the higher frequency stuff. Is in the 1950s is when the microwaves really were used with the famous candy bar melting in the pocket, the military thing, right? Most people are aware of that.
Well, I never heard of that story, Scott, but I did hear that the military guys would stand in front of the radar before a big night on the town, and pretty much guaranteed they would never get a girl pregnant.
Well, yeah, I mean, in some ways, for some people that might actually, no, I'm just kidding. But it's never a good thing to add more potential oxidative stress, especially to any cell, because when the synergy's right and you get enough the wrong situations happening on a systematic level, you could set up and make conditions ripe for disease expression, whether that be cancer or any other particular disease that's tied especially to your mitochondrial genome because it's listening to and sensing the environment around you. And that's part of it we can get into a little bit later too. It's mitochondria, because that's really what we're all becoming, because we're finding out we have to become mitochondriac. This is how we're more sensitive to it. And I also see it through the mitochondrial genome itself. It's a very small genome. It's its own, maternally inherited one, but it's not like bundled up with chromatin, with, chromosome, like in their own chromosome. It's, I think, more potentially exposable to damage compared to the nuclear genome. Mm-hmm. And I want to see more science on that, because I think that's where it's going to have to go to really start, pooling research funding, everything into the mitochondrial side of it, because that's where these diseases are tied to. And we're talking 40 plus diseases right on Doug Wallace's video. You can just look it up and see all the links there to the different mitochondrial diseases.
Right. Hey, Scott, so that's a perfect segue. A lot of these talks we do, at least on my Facebook Lives, are really geared around becoming a mitochondriac, about optimizing your mitochondrial health. So talk about how do these EMFs from our phone, from the electric wires running through our home, how do they impact the health of our mitochondria?
So there's a couple different, it's like a pretty big, I think, gambit of stuff to talk about, but just to make it more simplistic to listeners, I would say more think of it like this. If you are vibrating the tissues and causing more stress, which is oxidative stress, you're putting more stress on the cell. More potential to make free radicals are happening. Now, if you're getting out into nature a lot and you have really good free radical scavengers like melatonin or vitamin D, you could be mitigating these things for a long time, especially if you have no mitochondrial damage already. But like a person like myself, I'm 47, I've been exposed, I've worked in an industry, and I've, willingly worked in an industry where I know I'm going to have just more EMF exposure. Most people don't even consider that, but for the mitochondria, it's the mitochondria ideally needs to have an even balanced energy management where it's producing the ATP it needs to all the time. And that's where a lot of people talk to about this. I like to use the analogy of a top, like an actual toy top that you spin around. Mm-hmm. And I posted on my own Facebook too, recently, where you can see what's called the ATP ACE, which is in the fifth cytochrome. It spins, and it's optimally trying to spin at a particular hertz rate, so it doesn't have any hiccups in the spin rate. Because if you have hiccups, then you're affecting the energy generation for the mitochondria. And as long as that thing's spinning good and the whole system, the whole engine is working good, then you're good to go, right? But that's in reality with how everything is working. It's very difficult to kind of assess your situation, not only across your entire body, but in specific parts of your body where there could be more mitochondrial damage taking place, in the liver or in the gut or in my eyes, right? Or in my ears with my tinnitus, or so I have to always think of it really on a cell to cell point of view, because you could be exposed to these things all the time. You feel great. You don't have any problems. You don't have any expression with even biochemical, toxins. It doesn't have to necessarily even be EMFs, but it could be just a whole synergy you're putting yourself in. And then over time, it's suddenly, okay, I have a colon problem. And why am I getting more, wear and tear, and that part of my body is breaking down? Well, the entire body has all these systems interlinked through it. Obviously people know the brain-gut axis. There's different information, different signaling happening all over the body. So, again, this goes back to the whole stupid reductionist thinking that our entire medical profession's under, where you go see just the heart specialist, or you go see this guy and you go see this guy, but really the body's so interconnected. One expression in your gut can affect, or in your brain, in your gut, could then have an influence on the brain, and then later on it has an influence on your cardiovascular system, and how it's interlinked is what's being missed by our modern medical profession. And it's being missed because of the not thinking of the biophysics and how all these points could be connecting. So I almost have to think of myself as like an investigative journalist of my own biology, because like if you don't have that Sherlock Holmes kind of thing built into you, then you're just going to accept what you're told, and all the paradigms people have already developed today in our modern medical establishment omit what other systems could be happening and are actually known to happen in the science. Like, it's there. It's up on PubMed. You can go just start digging and be that, investigative journalist, or go into Cruz's site, right? Go to jackcruz.com and dig into all of his work, because he has it up there. He has like a library, a giant resource of information of putting all of these links together through the biochemistry and the biophysics to start getting a understanding of what other things you could be missing from your knowledge set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, guys, I can't stress that enough. You have got to become your own Sherlock Holmes. And if something just doesn't seem right to you, do some investigation. It's never been easier to research this stuff than it is today. So you've got Jack Cruz's website, you've got the EMF Warrior website. There's so many websites where you can investigate this and see for yourself, and look at all the published research that's out there. And at some point you need to ask yourself, am I going to listen to the tech companies that profit from this stuff, or am I going to look at the published research? And most people today are accepting the word of these tech companies. And it's kind of like listening to a big tobacco executive tell you that tobacco doesn't cause cancer and believing them. So, Scott, one thing I've really noticed about Scott is he's so observant, and he pointed out some of those things tonight. But, Scott, I want you to talk about your observation of the show Survivor. And I forget where I heard you talk about it. Maybe it was on your interview with Nick Pino. But anyway, share that observation you made from watching the Survivor show.
Yeah, I was actually a little bit pissed off watching it back when I was really sick. I'm like, if I could get on Survivor, everyone thinks in their mind, what if I got on Survivor? Oh, wow, I could lose like 60 pounds and get my health back and everything. And then it occurred to me after, back around maybe 2013, 2014, whoa, that guy was on Survivor. Why is he all fat and like lethargic now? And then it hit me like, well, he's not on that island in the sun. He's not grounding. He was eating like very starchy foods, even like down in the tropics. I'm like, okay, it's not really about the food, is it? What's going on? And then I thought, oh, that whole island was in the middle of nowhere, and it didn't probably have a very good power grid on it. Very low exposures to the power grid. Oh, look at that. Nobody was on their cell phone. Oh, there's no radio frequency out there. Maybe from some planes or some radar and some other potential. But I'm like, they are in the sun. They're waking up every morning with the sun on a beach. Then they're going out into the ocean, which is a beautiful EMF mitigator. They're in the water, fishing, eating fish, which is great. DHA, Jack Cruz talks about it all the time. So they're kind of like, they're out there, and you see all these drastic changes. And I thought about it, like it's this really quick microcosm where you watch a show like Survivor, they're forced to do things differently, and their health improves, like dramatically in very short periods of time. And I'm like, okay, so, there's 2013, 2014, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to kind of try to, as much as I can, even though I'm working and, my life's busy itself, I'm going to try to, fast more, and see if that has an effect. And I'm going to try to eat differently, cram in more seafoods and this and this and this. And then suddenly, bam, 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 all, my eye issues are kind of good now. Like, I have some spots that will appear from time to time, but because I've lost a lot of my body fat, and I'm not having, my body's just working better. I get moderate exercise, not anything crazy. As a matter of fact, if I go too crazy on the exercise, I typically find I'll have like a potassium loss, and then I'll get more cramps or heart palps, things like that. So, because I'm a kind of person where I was playing like, varsity soccer, and I get really intense with my sport. And I even like, on the weekends I'll go chop a tree down. Like I was doing that up in Seattle, doing, gardening, just doing more heavy yard work and heavy exercise can get me into trouble actually for like my electrolyte, my salt balances, things like this. If I'm also weaving in like intermittent fasting and or ketosis, because it's really causing my body to become more catabolic. And it will just like, I want to really use whatever I can to break this down to like, keep things in line. So really now I'm more mindful where if I know I'm going to have an exercise day, I'll go do the exercise day and I'll feed myself and come back off of it mindful of that. And I won't like pull everything together because I view them like these are different tools we have, in our toolbox to help our mitochondrial function. Now the fasting is a big one because a lot of research points to mitochondrial biogenesis where it can help rejuvenate mitochondria by doing fast from time to time periodically. So I still even weave that in quite a bit. I'm a little ketotic now in the winter. In the summer, I'll pull back to eating like more of a low carb diet again, just because I want more of the antioxidants coming through, like the fruits and like the resveratrol and those kind of things you can get naturally. So I am still mindful of the biochemistry, but I also think about how the biophysics is affecting our seasons and even our day-night cycles. Right, that's like a huge gate. Like if you don't have your sleep pattern down, if you're not able to wake up at the same time every day, like naturally your body doesn't wake you up and you're like hard to get out of bed, you're probably having some circadian problem. Like you're getting too much blue light at night, or you're not getting out in the morning enough. That's another big one. Most people miss that in the equation. Like I view getting out in the morning way, way more important even than mitigating light at night, even though I still mitigate the blue to green light frequencies at night. But getting out in the morning, spending time outside, I literally am very old school. I'll take a book outside, read under the sun for like half hour, 45 minutes in the morning before I go to work. And that's my daily pattern. I'll get out, go out there and do that. Now, where I live at 5,000 feet altitude, and it was 23 degrees out there today. But I still got out, and I still even pulled up. Yeah, I still had, like, I did actually have a jacket on this morning, but I pulled up the sleeve.
To like sunglasses?
My legs and my arms are radiated by that sun.
That's awesome. So all these things Scott's talking about are very simple. Spending time in nature, getting outside, getting sun exposure, blocking blue light, distancing yourself from your cell phone, from your router, from anything that puts out these radio frequencies, these electromagnetic fields. Scott, any other kind of mitigation things and strategies people can do?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, but unfortunately, what I've found is where you live is really the big one. Like, if you live in a saturated environment and you're just surrounded by phone towers and whatever RF emitters, and we're all going to be doing, it's all going to happen to pretty much the good majority of us coming up here as the tech rolls out. We're going to be more inescapable. So it's really getting your distance. And what I recommend, if people have the money to do it, is like when you have a home, try to get a home that has more land around it, maybe like an acre that the house is on. So at least you have some distance from your neighbors if they're pulling shenanigans with their radio frequencies, their Wi-Fi systems, because again, it's using that inverse square law. Just distance yourself a little bit more from things. And typically, if you have a little bit more land, now if you're living in the Midwest, you might be able to afford it. But if you're living in California, I mean, man, you couldn't have hardly any land at all without being almost a millionaire down there
Mm-hmm.
or San Francisco, right? So it's really problematic. Like, if you choose to live in the smart grid in the city, it's going to be hard to find, or financially hard to just get out of that suit. Now, then, if I knew I had that kind of stress going on, especially with my eye issues, I would go and have to make nature even a bigger thing, right? I'd have to get out even more, find a park or somewhere where I feel good. I know, well, I could measure with my meters, but, that's the other half of the battle, is most people won't have meters at this point to know what actually is going on in their environment. And, there's so much that comes into play here. It's hard to, like, recommend anything, like, over the phone, like I'm doing to people for trying to mitigate something in their personal environment, because every environment is so different. Like, I'll give you an example. This current house I'm living in, I actually have a stupid wire coming in off the cable company that has an 80 milligauss magnetic field associated with it. And I had an electrician kind of, like, rewire where it's going so it no longer goes under the home, under the space, or, like, close to my bedroom. It's, like, out under the deck now. But because of that one little tiny hack, now at night, if I would have measured in my bedroom along one side of the bedroom, like where my bed was, I would have potentially been in, like, because of how it's falling off, I would have been in about a 3 to 4 milligauss field. But now that it's out there, farther away, I don't have any magnetic field being generated into my bedroom from that wire that was kind of down underneath the floorboard.
Right. And now you're sleeping a lot better, I bet, too.
Right. But why did I know that? I only knew that because meters tell you that.
Yeah. You guys got to invest in your meters. If you can't measure
it, who would have known?
You don't know.
Well, who would have known one little stupid wire would be producing such a huge field? So, like, how things are set up, every little microcosm of your environment matters, because, like that's a good example. Like, even the wiring in your walls, how shielded they are, and things like that. So it takes time to measure these things, and then, like, start making statistical points over a period of time to, like, really get an assessment of what is going on. And, like, you have to, like, I'm a little more mindful of detailed thinking, right? So I'll continue to go and remeasure, like, every month or so, just to see if anything might have changed. And it has. So, like, long story short, there's a lot of easy things people can do. Like, if you have a 2-pronged anything plugged into your wall, it's ungrounded. So unplugging that at night is, can take away the electrical field, even if that's, like, for instance, a lamp could have an electrical field associated with the wire along it all the way to the lamp, even up to the bulb, even when the light's off. And if you just unplug it, now, it basically turned off the circuit right at the wall, so now you don't have maybe an exposure coming from other wiring around your bed. Okay.
Very simple. Very simple.
Yeah, very simple stuff can happen. Knowing the physics, right, you can start thinking about this, but then to the rest of the world that doesn't know, you kind of look like a little bit of a loony going, like, why are you unplugging the lamp at night? Or, but what I literally just go to I have a circuit breaker box in my kitchen, which is really convenient, and it's really out of the way, too. It's not even in a space nobody's at, so I'll just go shut down the circuit breaker to the rooms at night. So it just, clamps off the energy all the way back to the circuit breaker board. So there's no energy from the power grid coming into my spaces when I'm sleeping.
Yeah. Scott, I do the same thing. That has made such a huge difference in the quality of my sleep. Talk about just waking up with more energy and not waking up throughout the night, tossing and turning as much. Huge difference.
Yeah. And like I was saying before, like with my eye issues, it's not, everyone does like to be focused more on the microwave side of it, and everyone needs to be focused on that. But don't take your focus away from the power grid, the electrical and magnetic fields either, because, for me, in my eye issues, some of my worst issues really are generated from magnetic field exposures. And that's how I I learned about it really is that I had a screen too close in my workspace. My screen was about like maybe 1.5 to 2 feet from my face. I was working on it back in 1997. And the doctor at the time, he was really concerned about the ionizing radiation from the older sets, as we all know, that are bad as well. And so he recommended you should do what you can to buy like some screen blockers to put over your screen to prevent the ionizing radiation. And then instinctually, I'm like, well, screw that. I'm going to push the monitor back another 3 feet, away from my eyes.
Right.
Sure enough, that helped tremendously, not knowing at that time I was sitting in a big magnetic field with that.
Right. Yeah. So it all goes back to distance is your friend. That's come up a lot. So if you take anything away from this, make sure you do take away that distance is key in minimizing your exposure to these different kinds of radiation.
Yeah. And then like you were saying earlier, we have other people out there, not necessarily, I'm not going to call it industry because it's specific people in industry that don't think these forces are problematic for any intersection to your health. And, there's a lot of people out there like me that I want my cake and I want to eat it too. I want my tech, but I want it safe or safer. Because safe is like relative. It's like there's never going to be a level of safe, right? Because you're going to have some exposure at some point. And it's not just to the EMFs, it's also it's to the visible light frequencies that are also pulled. So that's pushing signals into your eyes and telling different parts to the back of your brain that different things are going on at the wrong times of day. And we want to try to just nail that circadian rhythm as much as you can. That's the number one thing I have to do for my health. That's why I get up in the morning. That's why once the sun goes down, I'm making sure I always have my blue blockers on. I do it because of my eye health. Other people might be able to get away with it more, and and other things won't show up in them as fast or as frequently. Not to say they're not damaging themselves. They may well be damaging themselves or sending the wrong signals to them. But you have to think of this over a longer time span. We live in such a fast food society. People are thinking, well, I just watched television at 11 o'clock for the last 3 years in a row. I don't feel any different. I don't have any problems, blah, 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 right? Well, this is a very slow-moving, insidious, damaging thing that can happen. Just because, and I joke about this from time to time, if our mitochondria could talk, they'd be saying, don't do that. You're hurting, you're potentially, creating some free radicals here and damaging my engine a bit. But people don't think of it from that point of view, and maybe, our lives are long enough. Maybe a lot of people are like, well, it's silly to even think that. Why would I even be concerned about my mitochondrial health? And it's like, well, come on here. Look at the diseases that are popping up here compared to 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
It's all about connecting the dots from the technology back to health. A lot of people don't want to make that leap because their livelihoods are dependent on it, or they're worried about if they do make that leap and they try to hack their world, there could be other consequences, financial consequences, for actually attempting to do that and let other people know that they could be damaged potentially from a slower moving, very insidious, very hard to see thing, because and a lot of people out there, especially when they're younger, they'll never be. Actually, Marino told me that in his interview when I interviewed him. He's like, well, the younger person, what is he going to do? He's like, the world's in front of me. I have this whole life to live. I'm going to take risks. I'll take any risk and enjoy life while I have it. Well, that's great. It's a good way to live. And I, in a weird way, I kind of agree with that, because you're not seeing the damage in front of you, and that placebo effect of the world's my oyster is actually a good thing, because it keeps your mentality sharp and optimistic, and positive attitude goes a long way for your health. It's like the old Chinese saying, put a smile on your face, you just put 10 years on your life. You know, that resonated with me back when I was taking Chinese as my my language choice. And it's like, the real interesting thing is that it's so true, because like your heart, you know, emits a biofield from it. You know, it has a field, I think it was measured out to like 5-6 feet away from the body. Even though, of course, your brain's electrical, it has a field. So the emotions you put into you can potentially have an influence on your own field. And, you know, a lot of people say, well, I got that weird feeling from that person. You know, I'm not one to dismiss that as an actual scientific observation of the fields that we can even create within us can have an influence here, even though this sounds like pretty woo-woo, right, to the person that doesn't know about EMFs at this point.
Yeah, really great point, Scott. I want to highlight one thing you said about really taking a long view approach to this. I mean, most cancers have a 10-year latency, and I'm sure we all know people that have been smoking for like 10, 15 years, and even though they're coughing, they're like, I'm fine, and then next thing you know, they get cancer. And for a lot of people out there, these symptoms, the effects of EMFs are going to be less obvious, but at some point, it will catch up to you. But to add to that, what else Scott said, being positive goes a long way too. So doing things like meditation to help manage your stress is another very good strategy you can do in the modern world we live in. So Scott, I've got a couple of questions. So are you cool with going into like doing some Q&A?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So Rochelle Jones wants to know, what are some low EMF building material tips?
Yeah, that can be kind of tricky because of, like, for the wire, like the wiring itself needs to be well shielded.
Okay.
There's ways to do that with, especially with the modern code. Depending on the wire you have and what's running through it. But generally, like, we're in a situation, like, let's say our magnetic and electrical fields are pretty minimal in a home. There's also some potential with, there's a lot of like electrical systems that could actually have some mixing. That, what I'm saying is that you might actually choose a home where there could be different ground, like there could be a different ground potential in like your home, like the way it's grounded compared to other things in your neighborhood that could be grounded differently, that could cause a difference, and potentially even raise the entire magnetic field in the area. I've seen this all over the place in different places over the years, where like an entire like business space or, you know, home or apartment complex could be totally awesome. There's hardly any magnetic fields going on there. Everything's really well shielded. The buildings are made of materials that help to backblock the higher frequencies, like the microwave RF. But unfortunately, like the lower frequencies are, you know, a lot taller. Like, you know, the lengths are huge on these things on the 60 hertz power grid, or 50 hertz like over in Europe. But we have these, like, it's very hard to shield with against like some of these fields. I mean, it can be done, but it's really expensive on the lower frequencies. But the higher frequencies have it's a little easier to shield, but then because of where things are emitted from, it can come in and saturate all over the place, and it's harder to control like how you're being shielded. Because, like, for instance, if you have a room in a home, imagine a room, and you have brick or like concrete walls, it can help absorb a lot of the microwave frequency into them. But let's say then you also have windows, you know, like French doors into a room and a huge window space. It can still bring in the microwave into the room quite easily, even though the other materials are blocking and shielding off another section of it. So it really depends on the location of where the emitter is, and if it's like, especially like if you have line of sight to it. Because if you have, like, let's say a row of homes, but on the other side of that row of homes is a mobile phone tower, by the time it gets toward your home, it could be pretty well mitigated. Especially like I live in a in a pine tree forest, And a lot of the pine trees around me actually help to mitigate some of the EMFs, because if I get my meters out and have my meters more tightly behind trees, and then I'll pull my meter out and I have like a big, nice viewpoint up to a hill where there's either a radio tower with some cell phones up there or whatever, then I'll see my meter just start cranking a lot higher in comparison to the mitigation that the other parts of the environment is helping with. So really, with that said, like, this is what Becker talked about in his book, Cross Current, where if you find a home more like tucked in, down, and use the earth itself as a mitigator against especially the higher frequencies, the radio frequencies, that is a really good strategy, because now you like literally, the earth itself is blocking for you, and you could find a place like along the side of the hill, for instance, to tuck your home in, and really you would only be concerned about stuff where the home is facing outside, away from the hill. I actually had a very similar situation up in Seattle where my home was that way. At the top of the hill where I lived, there were like 5 mobile phone towers, but they were all completely benign to me just because of where my home is located. Okay. Now, light reflects, so it could be that if I had a big, like, aluminum wall, like from my neighbor's house, that was in a good position, it could have actually converged or reflected back and still beamed my home from kind of like a reflected form of that light from the from a cell phone tower. So where you live, there could be specific hotspots going on with radio frequencies, and there could be specific hotspots like with the lower frequencies with the magnetic and electrical fields. So again, it's like you don't really know this, and in some ways it's better to be a little naive unless you've got a good solid spine and backbone to not let this stuff scare you. But I like to be more safe than sorry, and I'll find places, and I know my hotspots around my own home. I'll be like, please, my dad comes over, see me. I'll be like, Dad, please do not stand right there for too long. Or, if he finds a spot in the house where I know it's a really, out of control EMF zone.
Okay. So cool, really good points. So there are some very, those are some good strategies. If you're going to be building your home anyway and you're looking for building materials, do some research on the area, find out, where the hot spots are, and if you can, build your home into the earth and put your bedroom there in a strategic place in the home that's going to be lower in EMFs. Awesome, Scott.
One other point. A year ago, I helped mitigate another person's house, and it was actually a house made of Adobe material. But what they used they used kind of a chicken wire in the actual building itself, and it almost made the home. And they even had a metal roof on it. But they made the home almost like a Faraday cage, and they were using like 2 different Wi-Fi emitters in the home. And really, they were just like trapping all of that radio frequency microwave in the home.
Right.
Because it was like more like a Faraday cage, and I let them know that, and some of her issues immediately went away. She got a way better sleep that night once she turned off her routers. That was a huge tip. Just not having that router on, or just going hardwired, go Ethernet, and now your connection speed, your uploads, your download rate, everything just improves because you went hardwired again.
Right. Good, cool. So, in a future Facebook Live, I'm going to have Danny Skolin on, and he goes into homes and he helps, people find the hot spots to avoid and do things to mitigate it. But Danny Skolin asked the question. This is actually for another interview I did with Nick Pinot. We ran out of room, so I'm going to bring it up with you, Scott. But kind of like you were talking about this before, with 5G comes all these different devices that connect into this network. So Danny made the comment that he's been in homes that have higher RF fields than you would get sitting under a cell tower. And it almost sounds like the home you just mentioned, where they created their own Faraday cage, but they were trapping the EMFs in there. What are your thoughts on some kind of safe tech in the future of different things that can help kind of mitigate these different risks that our current technology is putting off?
Yeah, there's actually some tech that exists right now, but it's still like using Wi-Fi. Like there's things called mesh networks where you can kind of control like the intensity of. It really doesn't take a lot of intensity to make your Wi-Fi connection. These things are just like our regular Wi-Fi routers just spam so much energy out, so much intensity that it's kind of ridiculous. But again, it's like that shouldn't be like. I don't want to call it safe because like any level of EMF to me in my world with my eye issues is not safe. It's just potentially less potentially damaging. So whatever the word is for that, but trying to make the tech more safe where like the exposure, not just the intensity, but the proximity to them and to workspace, if that gets reduced, or if you modulate somehow the modulation of the wave carrier itself, you go into the physics and you try to like smooth out that wave and make it more natural, more like light. What it, like how the EMF should, like when something comes in from light, right, like from the sun, it's completely different because it doesn't have the information, like it has different kind of information, but it doesn't have like our modulated information. There's not like sharp peaks and troughs, and it's not like a square looking pattern, and it's not smooth. So all of this confusion when we're hit with these frequencies, I think is going to be a thing in the future where people will start to identify, how these waveforms are really, what these waveforms are doing. So what I like to do is the wire itself. It's like, and a lot of people don't know, it's like, why is this little bump here on my wire? What is that doing?
Yeah,
well,
right there.
That's saying like off the AC grid, so off of our alternating current, the smoothness of that sine wave can be smoothed out more by certain techniques, like by using a certain kind of shielded wire or using ferrite cores or other strategies to help smooth out that sine wave. And I think that's going to be investigated more and more in the future on how that sine wave itself is less detrimental or more detrimental to your health. And you really can't throw these things in the air and try to smooth out the higher frequencies because they're all like modulated anyway, and they're all these weird shapes and waveforms that are hitting us. So the real question is, what happens in studies in the future where you have a smoother waveform versus a choppy waveform? How is that impacting systems over longer periods of time? And sadly, like you said earlier, like when that glioblastoma in the brain or something that expresses itself because of frequent radio frequency exposure, if that was contributing to it, like these are long processes that take a longer period of time to develop. So like it's still going to be years or decades out before we're really going to get more solid scientific observation that points toward one thing or another in one direction more and more, because there's so much there already, 25,000 studies all through the EMF, if not even more, from all around the world, that it's really our modern countries, all the really strong tech countries that are kind of downplaying the interactions to the health, and it's like a lot of the other countries that are like still like just looking at the biophysics and going, okay, we're going to try to test and test, but you got to have the funding, the money, the time, the time to test these things over longer periods of time to see if what this is doing to different systems, especially these systems in the mitochondria. Right.
So lots of opportunities out there for entrepreneurs in the tech space to create safer technology. So Seamus Ryan wants to know if you believe that the mobile phone was intentionally designed to control people, and is it the TV of the 21st century?
I guess the keyword there is control. I think, like, looking around as you walk down a street, getting hit by a phone walking, texting person, there's that form of control. I really don't think it's intended. Okay, so like, right, in the I remember in 1994, my father had his own phone in his car. Like, he had like one of the first mobile phones stuck in his car. And, really back in the time, it was sold to the public as a measure of safety. Like, oh, like if I'm stranded out on a road, now I have a phone, I can call in, I don't have to go to the old phone box, which if you remember out on the highways, we used to have like every 2 or 3 miles along a freeway, there was actually a phone box. In case you broke down, you could go one direction or another and go call in for help for a tow truck or something. And, of course, all those went away, but really it was intended back in the day for safety. And most, right, even like today, a lot of people don't know how the tech works, but even back then, I think they didn't expect people to use it the way we use it now, because obviously with how computers develop and how the relatedness with social media is such a strong thing with people, and now everyone's getting the blue light for more addictive qualities, staying in front of it, myself included, I will admit. I have to be, like, I'm very mindful on the time when I'm on the computer, but, from time to time, I, even find myself, whoa, I've spent an extra, 15, 20 minutes here more than I wanted to, just bumming around. It's like, what am I doing? So, I think people need to be genuine and truthful about the tech they're allowing, not just to themselves, especially the parents, but to their children. As an 8-year-old, I'm super mindful of this because you can see patterns in kids very clearly where the adults don't get as affected. The kids, just eat this stuff up.
Yeah.
And want to be around tech all the time, doing whatever. It's good to be disciplined and set the pattern for them. And it's like, this is your window where you get your tech time if you allow it. But people are going to have a lot of, for me, it's like I do a lot of things to already mitigate my kid's world. Like I'll have Iris, which is a software program like FLF, which will, help blue block. But my kid wears blue blockers. Like he actually wears them, which is awesome. A lot of kids, wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And I have this whole space mitigated. I have things, I'm using the inverse square law. There's hardly any field around the area. I have the dirty electricity actually cleaned up, especially around the computer areas, because my computers generate a lot of DE. And, which off the power grid, you can measure this with a microsurge meter to know, other generation of waveforms that can come off the power grid at higher frequencies.
Yeah.
So some homes are different. I don't know. I'll let you. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question to answer, and I think we could probably spend, a whole hour just kind of talking about that. But you're just you brought up meters a couple times, Scott, and there's a question in the comments here. The meter I have is a Cornet ED88T. It looks like this. You can buy it on Amazon. This measures RF waves. I've got another one. This is a tri-field meter. This measures electric waves and magnetic waves. So you need both. But Scott, would you care to comment? Are there meters that you would recommend over those?
I really don't like recommending meters because there's a couple qualities that, every meter is going to have its specific things. It's I have literally 4 different radio frequency meters, including the acoustimeter, the acousticon, the cornet. So I can actually, by having the volume of meters, now of course I've spent a lot of money on these over the years, but I can actually see what one meter is doing and another meter is not doing. And some meters don't pick up the frequencies other meters do pick up. So some people might think their environment's fine, but it is potentially a false sense of security based on seeing what I'm seeing with other meters. Now, I don't even have some of the big, industrial scientific stuff that would cost somebody $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000. like the spectrum analyze the waveforms to see what's really going on, like on a specific frequency level.
Hey guys, sorry about that. Not sure what happened. We lost our connection, and we're back. So hey guys, sorry if you were on the call before and we lost you. The video just stopped. Scott's thinking maybe the powers that be didn't like the direction of our conversation, so we're gonna push forward. But Scott, did you remember you were talking about meters, and some meters are good and some meters you don't recommend?
Yeah, I would say that, like, I'll try to make the point this way, that if you have like multiple radio frequency meters, it can give you a bigger picture statistically of what is actually coming into your space. Because, obviously the meters have different band ranges that they measure, like the Cornet goes up to 8 gigahertz, but it might actually not really go up to 8 gigahertz, right? Like with an acousticom or an acoustimeter or some other kind of meter, you could maybe get a bigger picture of what's going on in an environment by comparing all your meters.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have something like a super spendy, 10, 20,000 plus unit, like
okay, we're back live again.
Right.
So okay, hey guys, sorry about this. Not sure what's going on. It keeps on dropping. It could be some kind of conspiracy going on here. I don't know what's going on, but we're going to move forward. We are going to try this for the third time, and hopefully we don't get dropped again. But let's move on to the next question. So the next question is from Sharon Pilling. Sorry if I got your name wrong, Sharon. But Sharon wants to know about wearing blue blockers in the evening. Do I really have to wear them from sunset to 4:45 p.m. on? I get so drowsy and need to get some stuff done, yet in the evening hours, since I try to get outdoors in the daytime. My current routine is to use incandescent lights indoors, then at 6 p.m. I put on amber blue blockers. At 7 to 8, I switch to orange-red lights, and when I get up at night, I use red light. So I guess she's asking, what do you think about her approach, and what do you think about balancing using red light therapy when you're indoors to kind of help mitigate the effects of EMFs?
Yeah, so I do like her approach to try to minimize the signaling to the eyes. Like, that's what I would do. That's what I do, but I'm not offering her any advice. Like, it's kind of like, it comes down to the individual. Like, if she's getting super sleepy and drowsy, that's a very good sign, like, she's helping her sleep out. But, if she's got to do what she's got to do, it sounds like she's incandescent lighting, which doesn't produce a lot of blue light. I mean, it's more into the yellow to the red range and infrared. So that's what I do also around my home. Unless, like, if I'm in front of a screen, that's when I put on my blue blockers. And unless I just, like, I'll go into like a biohacker almost kind of mode where, or I'll pull it down to like almost a sleep mode where I'm not getting any blue coming through my monitor. But depending on what device you have, you might not have that option. And when I'm walking around the home at night, I kind of do this ritual where earlier in the evening, I just use the lighting as I would use it, but it's all incandescent, so I'm not getting the blue light passed up. But then another hour or two down the road, I'll actually switch off some lights that have more lumens, that are more powerful, and then turn those off, and then I'll turn on some lights that are a little more background or recessed lights that, it's kind of like a dimming time, a dimming period, where as the night goes on, I kind of like slowly reduce the artificial lighting in the home as well. And so you kind of try to mimic the sun almost. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, like kind of, but like I'm not thinking about it too much. It's almost like off the top of my head, I'm like, I feel that I'm getting a little more drowsy, so I don't want that brightness anymore if I'm in a space that has a lot of brightness. And a really good thing to like comment on here, which is lost on some people, and I don't think it's lost on Sharon, but it's very important to have balanced lighting in the space in the evening to not make your monitor the major light source in your environment.
Okay.
So a person that, like, I'd rather have even a little bit more lighting going on in the room with my incandescents if that means it helps balance out the whole room so that my monitor isn't that major source of light.
Oh, interesting.
Because, yeah, if that makes sense. So it helps eye strain and other things I found, right, with my own eye issues.
Okay.
Where if I'm sleeping in a room, or I'm not sleeping, if I'm like in a room and there's a TV on and there's no other light, I'll go actually turn on the light on purpose to balance out the whole lighting in the room.
Okay, good. Well, that's it for all the questions I had ahead of time. You guys, if you put a question in before, I lost it all when the feed dropped. So if you asked a question and we didn't get to it, go ahead and re-ask the question. TJ Long wants to say, so is having your smartphone in airplane not enough? Can you kind of elaborate on that question, TJ?
Yeah, you want me to elaborate?
Yeah, well, I was asking TJ to elaborate, but if that's enough for you to go on, Scott, then yeah, talk to that.
Yeah, well, is the concern that if it's in airplane mode, there could still be a risk? Is that kind of the gist of the question, or?
Well, that's what I'm asking him to elaborate on.
Yeah, that's what I would assume, because what I've noticed is, I'm on 3G, but I know other people that have had 4G, and I've measured their phones. And for the most part, when they go into airplane mode, it's not transmitting, but in some rare instances and cases, even in airplane mode, I suspect that there could be some transmission potential. The more modern phones have multiple antennas built into them. So, like, you could pick up your FM radio station on your cell phone, right? Mm. You can pick up, there's multiple antennas in there of different lengths. And depending on the app you're using, I've seen the situation where someone was playing a game and they were in airplane mode, but when they logged out of the game and it went to do an update thing, it appeared that it actually kicked in the microwave, even though it was in airplane mode. And I only knew that because I happened to just have the cornet there, and it was just on. And I'm like, where did that come from? Now, I had them turn it on again and try it again, and it appeared it actually happened again. So I was starting to get a correlation there that maybe this specific app is actually somehow bypassing the airplane mode restriction. So I don't put it past certain programs or pieces of software that could maybe do that. But for the most part, having it off if you're not using it, I don't see it being much of a problem. I haven't really seen, at least from my meters, that happening too much. But that's not to say how technology is moving into the future and how different software is being built out. Who knows what could happen there. So really shutting down the phone completely at night might be a good strategy there. If you just want to ensure nothing's coming in from any frequency, it's not pulling in any other frequency. Right.
Okay. Good point. And then TJ made another comment. So on a past Facebook Live, I made the point that even when your printer is turned off, it's still transmitting EMFs. And when you're not using your printer, if you don't want to be getting zapped, especially if you work close to it in your workspace, you actually need to unplug it. Because just like Scott was saying, he used his meter to measure cell phone emissions. I've used this meter just around my apartment to pick up different RF emissions too. So like Scott said before, a simple thing to do is when you're not using different things, unplug them. If you don't have the option to like turn your circuit breaker off at night.
So, and if it's a highly, like if it's an item a device that you use frequently and you're just like, it's just a pain to plug and unplug it, then just put it on a different switch, plugged into the other switch, so you can have access to flicking off that switch so it turns off completely.
Right.
But that would have to ensure that you're not getting the no electrical current going to it. So that's kind of what I have with my printer setup. I have one cord going to another cord, so it makes it really easy for me to unplug it.
Yeah.
And that, for the most part, that works pretty good, but it's a little, it's a little pain in the butt to do that stuff, right? Especially if you're like, well, do I really care about this amount of radio frequency, microwave? Well, most people won't care, but for me and my eye issue, I do care.
Yeah, it's a personal thing. If you have different issues that you're dealing with, you're going to have to be more strict. If you don't, then you can get away with more. So Leah Kissick-Larson asks, Scott, would you talk about plug-in devices to mitigate dirty electricity? And do you have a preference for a type, and which ones have you used?
Yeah, generally out there, people will find the Stetzer filters, Stetzer meter, the microsurge meter, and then the green wave filters and meters. I'm not going to recommend them either way, just simply because, and I actually use them. I use Stetzers in my home, but I'm careful how I use them. And what I'm saying here specifically, I'm careful because of knowing the load of power on each breaker. Because these things do kind of suck up a little more power, and I have them in spaces really more closer to where my computers are, knowing what DE is being eliminated. Now, ideally, you wouldn't even need to use filters if the energy flow into the home is really good and mitigated. But it's very hard now moving again. It's almost another side issue that's happening where a lot of people have like inverters for their solar panels on other homes in the neighborhood. That inverter will kick on, produce different waveforms and more dirty electricity coming through certain parts of the neighborhood, depending on if you're upstream or downstream from the electricity. And there's certain cases where you can measure what somebody else is doing in another home away from you. They are doing something that actually affects the dirty electricity in your own home when you measure these things like on a microsurge meter. So I generally, it's kind of like when an appliance is in use, like a monitor, computer, like all these things. I have my filters around those spaces to help reduce the DE generated from them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks. Yerasimos asks, what EMF meter would you recommend? We did cover that before. It's kind of complicated. Scott was saying he has different meters, and the different meters give different readings. This is the one I have. It's Cornet. I think it's ED88T. You can buy it on Amazon. You can measure RF fields with this. Another good one. This is kind of the standard for electric and magnetic fields. It's called a tri-field meter. You can also buy this on Amazon. So as Scott pointed out before, some of these do have their shortcomings. The really, really good ones are not cheap. He said they run upwards of $10,000. The one I showed you, this one is like $180. The other one is like $120, $130. It's a good starting point just to kind of give you an idea of where the hot spots are in your home, where to avoid, where to give yourself more distance, and where you need to do some more mitigation strategies.
Yeah. One thing I want to mention to you, Nathan, is that with the tri-field, like XD100, the XD100, that meter, I love the magnetic and electrical field measurement in it, but the radio frequency microwave setting is kind of blunt, and unless you're being pounded by, if you're really being pounded under a phone tower, that thing will start bumping and you'll register what's going on, because it's literally picking up stuff. You'll start seeing it moving around 10 milliwatts per square meter or higher before it even starts moving. Wow. But at that level is in my world, that is a very painful level of radio frequency.
Yeah, that's definitely the danger zone there.
Yeah, it's really good, like, you know, like with your cornet or with an acousticom or acoustimeter or something like this, they're way more sensitive, and you'll have a better idea of really what's going on in a more, kind of like the regular saturation that we're seeing. So like if you're not, let's say you're a mile or two away from the nearest cell phone tower, the other meters like the cornet and the acousticom, acoustimeter, even like the e-smog, fire, like a lot of these meters are great for hearing the EMF as well as seeing the number print out. So you'll get an idea, and you'll start identifying the frequencies coming in just by hearing them, and then seeing what the numbers are registering, and then you can compare the meters all amongst each other, all around each other, to see if one meter is kind of like not telling you the whole truth, and the other meter is like picking up more of the truth that you're actually measuring. So then you can get a better aggregate of what's really going on by comparing the meters. But that's when you get more hardcore into this, like me.
Right. So Dustin says, don't buy the $100 one, go straight to the $181. No, Dustin, what Scott was saying is basically you need both. One is good for electric and magnetic fields. One is good for RF fields. The cheaper one, it only picks up RF fields once they're super high, and you want something that's going to be more sensitive so you can pick them up at lower levels. So Dustin also wants to know, are these true blue lenses? They are not. These are custom-made tints by Matt Maruca. I am going to have Matt on a future Facebook Live to talk about his company, but his website is rawoptics.io. You can send your own glasses to Matt, and Matt will tint them for you. So he does a great job, but check out his website.
Yeah, that's great. Amazing what he's doing. And he's really actually been, like, Matt himself is really into this. He's been traveling all around the world meeting key people that are also, like, you know, if you're a mitochondriac, he's been meeting some of these people that are famous in this whole realm that we've been, like, diving into. So, like, I'm even gonna go pick up some blue blockers. I have like 14 different brands of blue blockers I've bought over the years, and just to like test them to see how well they work, how well they mitigate the different frequency ranges and bands they pull out. So I'm just gonna go, get some from him as well, so I can, like, again, have a nice comparison point with all my other blue blockers. Yeah.
So these block up to 550. These are some.
Yeah.
These are some non-prescription ones. These, I think, only do 500, but these are definitely, these I got from Matt are darker than my just kind of generic non-prescription blue blockers. And I do notice a difference in my sleep. So that extra, 50 nanometers of coverage does make a difference at night. So Dustin, what's the best recommendation? If you wear prescription glasses or not, then send them to Matt and get them tinted. But if you only want to spend like $10-20, just get some Uvex ones. Get something's better than nothing. If you have some more money to spend, because I think Matt charges about $70. But if that's in your price range, then send some glasses to Matt, and that way you have a lot more options on the different styles, depending on what you want to wear.
Yeah, very cool. I like walking up into the green is really good. Even in some scientific journal articles point to even the green light affecting circadian patterns for sure.
Right. Well, awesome, Scott. Any other questions, guys? Okay, well, my apologies for the feed getting dropped. I know there were a lot of other questions, and we went on for, let's see what time it is here. Been going for about an hour and 40 minutes. So, Scott, I really want to thank you for your time. If you guys are not a member of the EMF Warrior Facebook group yet, make sure you join that. They just broke 10,000 today, so congratulations, Scott. They also have an awesome podcast where there's Scott, there's another guy, Jason Bodden-Smith, and there is Jamie Lynn. Is that Is there anybody else that's a member of the EMF Warriors?
Yeah, Jamie Ann Montiel. You mentioned her?
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, the three of us are pretty much the hub. We actually do have other people that kind of work behind the scenes, but they're behind the scenes on purpose. And as we move forward, I mean, this thing's growing, and really it's becoming kind of what we want it to be. It's like hopefully we'll hit mainstream at some point, and hopefully be a good resource. Like, that's why we have the library of information up on our website. That's why we do the podcast very frequently, to let people know that we are not backing down on this issue. We want the mainstream to catch wind of it and then start talking about it. And, you know, it's going to go up the food chain at some point, and we want that to happen, you know, sooner than later. So it's not that, you know, like I said, our strategy is beneficial, beneficial just as much as calling out all the negative stuff going on, and really giving people a place to come and talk about their issues, and to, you know, even get people in industry to be alongside us and come onto our team to build safe technology, to understand all of the issues that are already in the science, because it's really a learning curve, and a lot of people first, you know, usually hiccup and dismiss and completely like play down the issue until they actually go in and start reading and educating themselves. And that's really our goal, is to get that education set out there so people can make their own decisions about how they want to live, and seeing if they actually can connect some of their health issues to what's going on.
It's awesome. I love it. And Scott has a lot of very in-depth interviews as well. He interviewed kind of one of the fathers of this research, Andrew Marino, who was partners with Robert O. Becker. And I mean, talk about an amazing interview. So if you guys are not a part of the EMF Warriors, get on the site, check out the podcast, catch up on the episodes. There's probably at this point, how many episodes are you guys up to, Scott?
We're up to 14 episodes now.
Okay. So 14 episodes. Yep. So, you know, Scott has mentioned a number of times on this call, one of the best things you can do is to educate yourself. So you've got a great free resource thanks to Scott and his team at EMF Warriors. Check that out. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Scott, thank you for your knowledge and your wisdom. I know I learned a lot of stuff tonight. Any parting comments or thoughts?
Yeah, like what you just said is perfect. Like, I don't personally want to go like try to convince people. I just want to like put it out there for them. Like, here's information for you. You take it for what, like, you go ahead and decipher it. If you have the time to learn on your own, great. But, you know, even myself, like I was saying, when I was back in biology a long time ago, I only thought the ionizing radiation, the higher frequency, you know, higher than the visible spectrum, was the major problem. And I even semi-dismissed the lower what we call now non-ionizing radiation, which is really just the definition of bumping out an electron, or the potential of bumping out an electron as ionizing and not bumping out an electron as non-ionizing. But there are countless research papers showing that there are biological effects with non-ionizing radiation. So the whole electron, like calling it in these terms, a lot of times appeases people. I mean, it appeased me in the past. And the narrative on it is kind of ridiculous, because whether it's ionizing or non-ionizing is a distraction. It's a scapegoat for just looking at what the frequencies are doing and the physics behind them. So once that clicked, and that was more like in 2010-ish,